Welcome to the Group of 78's annual policy conference, meeting the climate challenge, accelerating the transition to a post-carbon world. It's been a long, hot summer with extreme weather events marked by forest fires, hurricanes, floods, and record-breaking heat waves all over the world. And of course, just a week ago today, the Ottawa region itself was ravaged by 6 tornadoes, which wreaked devastation across our community, both within Ottawa and in surrounding areas, Gatineau, Dunrobin, and Calabogie. The intensity and frequency of such extreme weather events are, alas, only going to increase. So, what are we going to do about it? We're not here to debate the reality of climate change, although we may wish to discuss the speed at which it is occurring. Is it happening even faster than our fears? But we're here to discuss how we must respond to it and the urgency with which we must respond. I'll say more about the Group of 78 in a minute, but first I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered here on unceded Aboriginal land. We may have a speaker from the Algonquin First Nation join us, and if she does, I will introduce her so she can make a few remarks. But in her absence, I will just make that acknowledgement on behalf of Aboriginal First Peoples. What is the Group of 78? We've kept the title of the Group of 78, notwithstanding occasional discussions on the board and in the executive about a new name with greater clarity about the organization's purpose and mandate. Problem is, there's already a veritable alphabet soup of organizations with global, international, or foreign affairs in the title, descriptors that we might want to use. Moreover, choosing the Group of 78 was a deliberate nod to the Group of 77 countries which represent the developing countries at the United Nations. But most of all, we believe it's worth commemorating the visionary initiative launched some 37 years ago by 78 Canadian individuals, which speaks to its continuing uniqueness and relevance today. In 1981, 78 people signed a declaration which was presented to the Canadian government urging 3 priorities in its foreign policy. 1, remove the threat of nuclear war. 2, strengthen the UN and international cooperation to settle disputes and protect human rights. 3, mobilize resources to end poverty and for a more equitable international order. The ferment and passion of the debate leading to the 1981 declaration of the 78 gave birth to an organization that meets about a dozen times a year for lunch talks, special panel events, and annual policy conferences focusing on leading issues of the day. The 3 priorities of 1981 have coalesced over time into the G78's current 3 pillars of peace, justice, and survival. This year's conference is clearly dedicated to the 3rd pillar, survival. Next year, you might note, we will focus on the 2nd pillar of economic and social justice with the topic of global inequality and democracy. So stay tuned for that one. So who were the 78? Our website will give you a complete list, but it's worth emphasizing that they came from all walks of life, from the arts, Margaret Atwood and Anton Querty, from civil society organizations, including Richard Harmston, who is with us here today. Richard, put up your hand. Is Peter Meinke here? He was supposed to join us. He's a member of the Group of 78. Lois Wilson, the media, Clyde Sanger. Clyde is with us. And some former ministers who are not with us, such as Walter Gordon, a former diplomat such as John Humphrey, a former military such as General E.L.M. Burns, and former MPs including Andy Bruin, an MP who was a prime mover in the creation of the Group of 78. I see that Verna is here, so maybe if she's ready, I can introduce her. Okay. So will you please welcome Verna McGregor? Let me just say a couple of words about her. Verna's from the Algonquin community of Kitigan-Zibi Anishinaabe, which is approximately 120 kilometers north of Ottawa. She works at Minwashin Lodge, the Aboriginal Women's Support Center located here in Ottawa. She's also part of a group of traditional grandmothers and elders who promote the Algonquin language and culture, including the connection to the land. Particularly germane to this conference, last year she worked on a project entitled Indigenous Women Speak on Climate Change. Please welcome Verna McGregor.
This issue of climate change has been our issue for a long time. Just a bit about my background too as well. I did work back and forth. I came to school here in Ottawa, then worked for the bank, worked for real estate, then went to work for the Assembly of First Nations in ECDEV. ECDEV was quite a challenge if you're First Nation, because it's that understanding too of your core values, understanding that what we do to the earth, we eventually do to ourselves, that we're here for the next 7 generations. So it was a challenge with this ECDEV, economic development, and I'd get comments like, why can't you Indians just develop economically? And I said, well, it's a different understanding too as well. So anyway, what happened is, guess what? I returned back to my community in the early 90s, because I had my son too as well, and I wanted him to have the connection back to language and culture and community. And I was the community ECDEV officer there. And one of my projects that I worked on too as well was also going back this real estate and banking. I realized how much we were left out of this whole system. So anyway, what happened is one of my projects was maple syrup. And we started with a 10,000 tap maple syrup operation. Today it's 18,000 taps. Our tagline was blending tradition with technology. But this is back in the 1999. When we did our feasibility business plan, one of the threats that we identified was climate change. And I did a presentation to this other community, and I said, you know, one of the threats to the industry is climate change. And they said, that's so far off. And they said, well, why is it such a threat? Well, with the syrup, you need cold nights, warm days. The other part too as well, they were just starting to have the invasive species too, especially in BC. So again too as well, that's a threat as well. But during that time in the band office too, sitting with the elders, some very strong elders got in touch with my mother. And they said, we've been getting messages that the earth, these incidents, what we're doing to the earth, they're only going to escalate. They're going to get stronger and stronger if we don't raise awareness. And why did they come to Kitigan-Zibi? Because in Kitigan-Zibi also too as well, we had Elder William Commanda. Anybody hear of Elder William Commanda? Yeah. He was the carrier of this, one of the wampum belts, but one of them is a 7-fire prophecy belt. And I think we are in prophecy now, where it was foretold that we'd have to come together because the earth, we're developing too much to the detriment of even the 7 generations. And it's a 7 fire. There's 7 diamonds on this belt. The middle diamond is, there's a double diamond in there. It represents 2 roads. We either have an awakening or we continue on the road that we're doing here, which may lead to our own destruction, because what they say is that Mother Earth doesn't need us as human beings, human species. We need her. So anyway, that's where I come from. So as Roy mentioned too as well, last year I work at Minwashin Lodge, which is Women Escaping Violence. This is my tagline, Mother Earth. It's Orange Shirt Day today, on Sunday the 30th, to commemorate the residential school. I see another orange shirt lady in the audience. But one of the projects I worked on is Indigenous Women Speak on Climate Change. And it wasn't long ago, my grandfather, all you needed to survive was probably an axe, if that, and you survive by yourself in the bush. And you have the skills, you know the land, you know how to hunt, you would go in. Even when they were coming into the community to take away the children off to residential school, a lot of the families left into the bush. And once a couple of stories came out that all they left was an axe, and they rebuilt in the bush because of the skills they had. So anyway, so why I'm saying that is also too as well, when we had the roundtable last year, we brought a different Indigenous women together to have a talk about climate change. And one of the findings is too as well, they said, well, what happens when now we have a loss of those skills? That we no longer know how to survive. That over 60% of the population, the Aboriginal population, is now in urban centers. And what happens when major disaster strikes? Will we have the tools to survive? And if you look at what happened last week, for me, I just missed the tornado crossing the 5 by probably 5 minutes. But you see the devastation here. And again, I said, here we are. And then when I was doing this project for the Native Women's Association, they asked me to come in and talk about, for the Organization for Economic Cooperation, they had a panel. So I said, ooh, what am I going to talk about? And I made this presentation. But one of the main messages is that also Aboriginal women and children, but not just Aboriginal women and children in general are more vulnerable with this climate change. Why? Because of their socioeconomic status. Guess what? Children cost money. And when you have a natural disaster too as well, how is their safety put in jeopardy? Especially too if you become homeless. For us, we're dealing with murdered and missing women. Does that heighten their vulnerability? The other part now, if you want to talk about on a global scale, I said, my son was with the G7 youth this past spring. And they pulled them aside, these other countries, and they said, you know, they're not talking enough about climate change. Because what's happening here is what happens when the island states, such as the Philippines, Hawaii, now are threatened by flooding. They're threatened to disappear. What happens now when you have a big influx of refugees? Climate refugees. How will that impact your economy and the delivery of services? And again, too, as well, those are major, major, major issues that I think climate change. What I said on Parliament Hill, sometimes I don't think we have a choice but to change. We're going to have to change whether we like it or not. And here we are. So on that note, I usually, when we come together like this, we usually do a smudge, but you're all eating. And I arrived a little late. I'm going to say a little acknowledgement. It's not a prayer per se, it's an acknowledgement to acknowledge all the things that were gifted for us here as humans. Even the food that we eat is a gift. So if you bear with me, I'm just going to take my little eagle feather out. And I brought my little canoe here too as well, because that's what I do too the last year. For those of you who saw me, I said, for us as Algonquin, we were the first to meet Champlain in 1603 in Tadoussac. They call him the famous seafarer. And I said, but when we found him, he was kind of lost. You'll see him behind the National Gallery holding up his, whatever you call it, the compass. And I said, well, he was still kind of lost when we found him. But we brought him meat and medicine to survive here, and we brought him up the Ottawa River. Because again, too, as well, when I say Wagush Nadodem, my clan is Fox, and our clan system was based on the watershed. And we were known for the birch bark canoe. And when I go to climate talks last year, I said, and we travel carbon free. And I said, so I think but it was foretold too as well. As this escalates, this climate change, there will be a seeking of knowledge again as to why we lived the way we did. That understanding is what we do to the earth, we do to ourselves, because we're all interconnected, whether we like it or not. So on that note, I'm just going to say a little welcoming. And I don't think I'll take too much time. The other part is, you'll see that, is I have my little medicine wheel here. And it represents the earth. Everything is in a circle, represents the 4 directions, represents the 4 colors of people on this earth. That the basic teaching is that although we have different colored skin, different beliefs, what binds us together is that we all share this earth. We all share Mother Earth. Why do we call her Mother Earth? It's because she provides everything here for us to have a good life, including the food that we eat today, and the animals, the birds, the whole. So, and the other part of this too as well, it represents the 4 seasons. So you have the winter, spring, summer, fall. The sun comes up in the east, the 4 directions, the north, east, south, west. Sun comes up in the east, goes down in the west. North, cold, south, warm, although this is changing. But the other part is also, it's your life journey here. You come here from spirit, and you take your earth walk, your first breath, like a new day as a baby, and you begin your earth journey into adulthood, into becoming an elder in preparation to return back to spirit, to your ancestors who love you. Yeah, I have to talk into the mic. And but one of the teachings of the canoe too as well is to honor everybody's journey. And here we are. The other issue too, when I went to the OECD, that was last February, and I was talking about, one of the things I said is Canada doesn't have a national flood plan. That it's the only G7 country without a flood plan. And I said, so maybe there's interventions that they could start, and that would be a recommendation, even like the flood, what do they call it? The flow into the basements. So, and I said, it's because for us, historically, as Algonquin, why we didn't have very much development, even by the Chaudière Islands, was sometimes it would flood over. And wouldn't you know it, in February, that March, the next month, they had the major flood here. And people weren't prepared, and a lot of women, and I see that the displacement of the women and children. So on that note, I'm just going to say a little prayer of acknowledging everything, because at the end, Mother Nature's in charge. And we have to put our minds together here. And I'm very honored to be here today with your gathering, because you've got to put your minds together while you share your food. No. So on that note, I say, miigwech kishema do, on jeni gashkito ma and dose koshe nongo, ma meka kinap matzjik. Shwen mishnone nabigis. Shwen wagia kakinap matzjik den is wagonje, jenagado amandanyan in the kimanan. Shkaki question kason in the kimanan. Miigwech onje yakakina ete kishiga. Kizas to be kizas, a shit your nungshuk, me gwetch on jayaka kina way seasak. No god the jick, permissive jick, pimodiga jick, me jim with jick kakinaguch. Kan chesh quatning way de semen kego gajimana doshes kana noj gujnig way de semen. We don't go yaka kina mam de game me gwetch on jayan and gokmas non him shumsenan. Then don't in his own shay non go mon jayan and double no jishak. Shwen mishnon and abigus, we don't go yak was a jick, the mug was a jick, we wisna jick. Kakinaguch. Kan sé squatning way they seem in there. Me gwetch. I say me gwetch is thank you, and I say it 4 times to honor the 4 directions that probably you come from 4 directions here. And what I say is really in a nutshell is thank you for allowing us to come together here. And thank you for all of creation. Thank you for all of our ancestors, our relations. Please help our people that are gathered here to look after the earth, because in essence we're here for the next 7 generations as well. So I wish you well, and your food is getting cold. Miigwech!